Good morning, Peralta. Welcome to the town hall on overtime. I'm Mark Johnson. Just want to let everybody know some basic ground rules about Zoom. This is a Zoom webinar format. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We know that in the past, sometimes people have used chat and sometimes we don't get the questions answered if they're submitted via chat. So please use the Q&A feature to submit any questions that you might have. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Chancellor Jackson. Dr. Jackson, over to you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad that I know we had a very short notice in getting this out. So I appreciate those of you that have logged in. We are recording this, so if you know anyone that is not here, we will be sending out an email notification with the link so that others can also view this. Just to start out with a few comments, as you know, we went live with the HRM platform with PeopleSoft 9.2 on April the 18th. As part of that process, we wanted to make sure with this new HRM process module that based upon recommendations that we received from FitMat, as well as ACCJC, as well as our auditors, that we had the proper internal control mechanisms in place. So after we went live, one of the things that we found is that we had individual employees that were assigned position numbers. And as part of those position numbers, they were assigned to a particular manager. And that manager is responsible for vacation, comp time, sick leave, overtime, etc., for that particular employee. And what was happening is that we had individuals that were doing overtime, and we're going to define what overtime is because I think the definition bears repeating, but we had people doing overtime that were outside of the manager of assignment. So their manager was not involved in the overtime. It was another manager from a different area. And as we looked at that, all of those overtime documents were being forwarded to the manager of assignment. So when we started looking at it, we found a couple of issues that came about. And so this meeting is to define those internal processes that we have under the new PeopleSoft manual, to discuss the ramifications of that, and also to make sure that it aligns with our existing policies, which it does, but we still want to go over what that is, just as a general frame of reference and to establish what the foundation and the platform is. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Interim Vice Chancellor of Human Resources, and then I think he will introduce his staff that are going to be making the presentations. So Dr. McKinley.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. So good morning, everyone. I'm very happy you're here. I'm glad to be talking with you. So I'm going to present a few things, and then I'll ask Immaculate Adesida, our Director of HR, to see if she wants to add anything. And then I'll also invite Amy Brandt, who is one of our labor attorneys with Liebert, Cassie, and Whitmore, so that she can talk a little bit more about the public policy that's applicable to overtime, and that would be at the federal level and at the California level. So I'll mention those in my brief presentation, but we'll let her also weigh in on that. So there are some differences in California that they're unique to California, put it that way. So if I may share my screen, I have some short slide presentation. So. All right, so this is about overtime, and this is really a restatement of Peralta policy and public policy, both federal and California, federal and state. So as you can see, that for overtime, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1937, I'd like to point that out. It's the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1937. So it's been the law of the land for the last 85 years. And it applies to every employee in the United States and to, without regard whether public or private, unless a state provides a greater benefit. And there's a greater benefit that's provided in California, and we'll discuss that later. But overtime is time that's worked in excess of 40 hours per week on the federal level, 8 hours per day on the California level. It is not time that is worked in a secondary assignment, for instance, during your normal working hours. That's not overtime. So it would have to be outside of your normal working hours, and that would be overtime. And so I just like to point that out. And next, I'll see if I can get to the next slide. Here we go. We know that there are a number of folks that have been asked to do secondary assignments and these secondary assignments have been done without the knowledge of the person's current supervisor. The policy is the current supervisor needs to be apprised of that and be all right with that, especially if the time is going to be worked outside of or during normal work hours, or if it's going to require overtime, because the overtime rate, then we were going to have secondary appointments. So for instance, an example would be, let's imagine a person is a financial analyst and they're making $30 an hour as a financial analyst. And they have been asked to be a lifeguard at a swimming event that's on Saturday or Sunday, and therefore it would be outside of normal working hours and be at overtime. Today, we've learned that the current practice, although not the policy, the current practice has been, they've been paid at the overtime rate of the financial analyst rather than at the rate of a lifeguard. Now, the Fair Labor Standard Act requires then that overtime be paid at a blended rate, which is essentially, okay, so the essentially, I got ahead of myself. Essentially, an overtime rate is, here we go. Federal is a blended rate, which is essentially a weighted average of the two rates together. So that means that it will be paid at a lesser overtime rate than if it was worked exactly in the primary appointment. So going forward, we will ensure, and we can do that now with the new PeopleSoft Upgrade, we can ensure that folks that are doing those types of secondary assignments actually get a secondary appointment to that particular job, and they will be paid at that rate, not the rate of their regular job while they're doing the secondary assignment. And any overtime will be based on that blended rate that I just mentioned. So I will now ask, actually, I'm going to ask Amy Brandt if she will please talk about the public policy.
Sure. Thanks, Ron, and nice to meet anyone who I haven't had the pleasure of working with yet. I'm Amy Brandt, and I'm an attorney in the Liebert Cassidy Whitmore office in San Francisco, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Ron really or Dr. McKinley really hit the highlights there on the requirements of FLSA and how California law differs as well. The other thing that is in play here is the California Education Code, and that as it pertains specifically to our non-exempt classified employees and when overtime may be due. In that case, and under Education Code, that group of folks, any hours worked in excess of 8 hours in any one day or in excess of 40 hours in any calendar week would qualify for overtime. There is language in this Education Code section, it's 88027, that also indicates that if the governing board, if your board of trustees has established a workday of less than 8 hours, but more than 7 hours. So some districts have, 7.5 hour work days or 35-hour work weeks. Those all have potential for overtime as well. So depending on your classification and your union and your position, overtime may look different. Those are all things that can be addressed through the PeopleSoft system. It seems like we are now doing an integration and transitioning over and using technology to help support these processes and streamline them moving forward. So I think this is all very, very good and very positive for the district as far as coming into compliance with what's required by not only federal and state law and the education code. Yeah, if there's anything in particular that I can help on as we talk through this conversation today, feel free to reach out.
So thank you very much, Ms. Brandt. That's very helpful. Also, so we would like to mention that exempt and non-exempt. So not everyone is qualified to receive overtime. Exempt means that if you're an exempt position, it means you're exempt from the wage and hour laws of the United States. And so administrators are exempt, that's the executive exemption. Teachers are exempt, that's professional exempt, learned professional exemption. And there are certain administrative employees who will be exempt because of an administrative exemption. However, classified employees are non-exempt employees, and therefore we are required to pay overtime. And you notice it's at a minimum of 1.5 times the base salary. That's possible that states or employers could provide more. A person does not get overtime on Saturday or Sunday just because it's Saturday or Sunday. I like to point that out. It needs to be still in excess of your 40 hours per week or 8 hours per day in California. So, but it's not automatic that Saturday and Sunday equals overtime. Depends on how much you already worked that particular week. Sick leave and things like that do not count towards overtime. So it's actual time worked is where your overtime calculation is made. So Director Adesida, is there anything that you would like to add, please?
Yes, please. If I may share my PowerPoint. I would like to address the current issues, what we are facing right now. We have some overtime that have already been worked. And we are wondering who is going to approve those overtime with the new PeopleSoft Phase 2 upgrade. And how should we handle the overtime that has already been reported? Who pays for it? Is it the present manager, or is it the manager that asked the employee to do the secondary job? And so payroll, human resources, and IT, we've come together and we have discussed that before today, before April 25th, 2022, there will be a one-time exemption. We have made a one-time arrangement for overtime worked in a different department with the combo code of a different manager to be used. And the special assignment manager can submit a paper request to payroll. But moving forward, with effect from today after this webinar, the new procedure will apply and will be enforced for overtime hours worked outside home department. An employee working on a special assignment in a lower classification will require a separate employee record. This is on a voluntary basis. The employee requested for this special assignment, and it is not part of the employee's primary job duty. VC McKinley had already given that example. For example, an IT employee going to general services to work as a lifeguard. In that case, the special assignment manager will initiate an e-form. And in that e-form, the special assignment manager will indicate their combo code. And the employee will be paid under the special assignment manager's combo code and not the usual regular employees managers combo code. And so we have separate payroll processing for before today and after today. I just wanted to add that. Thank you. Back to Vista McKinley.
All right, thank you very much, Director Adesida. I think we can handle any questions now. I answered some of the questions in the chat, or in the Q&A, I should say. I can do this real quick. Do classified get paid overtime Monday through Thursday for work 10 hours a day with the summer work schedule? Yeah, the answer to that would be yes. If we're on 410s, still anything over 40 hours per week would be overtime. And there was a question, is the secondary overtime an automatic approval by the primary supervisor? Their answer is no. That both supervisors, if you're going to work in another assignment outside your regular assignment, then you will be put in that job as a secondary appointment, and you'll be paid at that rate. And then work in that secondary assignment requires the concurrence of your primary manager. And they work with HR to receive a position number. That's a question, how do you get one? And that would be to work with your HR person. So Immaculate, Director Adesida and her team would be able to help you with that. Any other questions?
Oh, VC McKinley, you answered one of the questions, which was, is overtime paid when we're working 410s? And you said anything over 40 hours would qualify for overtime. But I think part of the question was, you had said that the state of California said 8 hours a day. And if we're working 10 hours a day, I think the question was, do we get overtime for the extra 2 hours?
So I'm going to ask Ms. Brandt to answer that question.
If there's been an arrangement between the district and the employee to work an alternative work schedule, and usually that's going to be consistent with a collective bargaining agreement, then in those situations, the employee would not be eligible for overtime if there's an arrangement for an alternative work schedule for a 410. If they work more than the 10 hours in the day or 40 hours in the week, then they would be eligible for overtime.
Thank you.
So we have a question. Do employees still need to complete the district's overtime authorization form?
Correct. Overtime should be pre-approved. However, if unauthorized overtime is worked, in other words, someone works overtime, but it was not pre-approved, we still have an obligation to pay for that. So we will. However, if a person works unauthorized overtime, then that subjects that employee to the disciplinary process.
Great. Thank you. Let's see, we have a question. Is the secondary overtime an automatic approval by the primary supervisor? Is there an understanding of how and when hours are worked?
Sure, I understand the second part of that. It's not automatic, no, but I'm not sure I understand the second part of the question.
Let's see, that was from Dr. Garcia. Let's see, while we're waiting for clarity on the first part, we have another question. How do we obtain a new position number?
Yes, you work with Director Adesida and her team to obtain a position number.
And I can just jump in quickly. You can request a position number within the new PeopleSoft systems. So please refer back to the guide and the training that we have posted on Canvas. In there, you can trigger a request for a new position number. Thank you.
Mark, is it possible for you to drag and put in the chat the link to the website with the training that we've recorded for PeopleSoft?
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
Let's see. So there was one question, can we provide handouts on how to add the overtime combo code? And I think that's part of what Chancellor Jackson was just asking. So I will share the training from Canvas regarding that particular aspect. And the documentation about overtime is found in the Canvas shell for the PeopleSoft 9.2 trainings. We have a question, how can we change the combo code for secondary overtime?
You have that same thing on into PeopleSoft. You can change the combo code and add a new combo code if you need it for any positions that you need to. It's on the training guide. So we are looking at maybe having a session, one more session around this, and or have an office hours, and we are looking at those things so people can come in and ask questions, and then we can support them and help them through this process.
Thank you. Let's see, the next question is pretty specific. So I'm going to ask one of my human resources colleagues if they can address the question about specific budget codes. There's a question about initiating the e-forms. Would it be possible for the classified employee to initiate the e-form and the manager to approve?
I can answer that question. It's mostly on the technical side. Yes, there is a delegation that is available to all managers that they can delegate those tasks to the supporting staff to initiate those inform, and the manager will be able to approve them.
Great, thank you. We have a question. What is the formula for overtime for the example that Dr. McKinley used?
All right, we can post that. That is it's a difficult calculation, if you will. So it's essentially a weighted average. So the example I used, so for instance, let's say you work 40 hours a week in your regular position, you work 10 hours a week in your other position. You total those. What you do is you total those hours. You total the amount the dollars worked, divide that by the number of hours worked, and you do a weighted average of the overtime rate. So it's not exactly. So for instance, it's not if I work 10. If my regular appointment was $10 an hour, or my other one was $5 an hour, and so my overtime rate would be $15 at my regular one and $7.50 at my other one. It's not an average of those two. It's a weighted average based on the number of hours that are actually worked in each position. Fortunately, PeopleSoft can do this. It has that formula built into it, so it's not a problem. And we will be paying the correct amount. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
What happens if you are not working in a lower class position? For example, supervision hours for facility rental that is paid at the overtime rate.
Can you repeat the first part of that, please?
What happens if you are not working in a lower class position? For example, supervision hours for facility rental that is paid at the overtime rate.
Yeah. So if your secondary appointment is a higher level position, then you will be paid at the rate of that position. So we just flip my example around. Let's say I'm a lifeguard and I'm making $18 an hour, and I also happen to be qualified to be a financial analyst, and I do that. Do that also 10 hours a week. Then I would be paid the $30 a rate for that 10 hours per week, and the overtime rate would be calculated still be a blended rate exactly the same way, depending, so that's how it works.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next question I see is about student overtime. For current student worker employees, does the manager need to enter a new e-form, or has all previous approved EPAFs been carried over into the new system? Some student workers are reporting there is no cost center attached to the online time card.
That sounds like an IT question to me.
Yes, yes, all the student workers have been carried over to the new system. And we have provided training for all the student workers. We have provided training for the student worker, but out of 300 student workers, only 150 show up to the training. And right now, as we're working to get them used to the new system, we have asked managers who hire them to help us reach out to the students, because we have sent out email to their personal email, the Peralta email, and also the CC email, the student email, to reach out to them to get them used to the new system and to walk them how to report their time. So if any students have any difficulty, they can reach out to help desk, to PS support. We are there and we are triaging the ticket. Please bear with us. We have a lot of tickets, and most of the tickets is referring to already things we already trained. If you're asking things that are related to training, we're gonna send you back to the training to look at the training. So start there first. If you don't see it, then you can ask the question, because we have a lot of questions that's already covered to the training. It's take a lot of time for us to go get those things and give it to you. So it's a very difficult situation we are put into. So please look at the training, go to the training. If you missed the training, all the videos there, we have quick guides that's gonna walk you through what you need to do. But please send the student workers, and we're gonna try to have another session for them, for those who missed the first session that we provided for the student worker, so we can make sure that they understand how to enter this information. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So the next question I think is a question both about timing and also about internal department versus working outside the department. The question is, only paper forms can be submitted for work completed before April 25th, can be submitted for work outside of the department. If work was done inside, it must be through PeopleSoft. And is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Great, thank you. So work done prior to today outside the department needs to be submitted through the previous system, and anything following needs to be submitted through PeopleSoft. Okay, let's see. The next question I see is, submit the overtime request and the related forms like before. Yes, the overtime request should be submitted ahead of time. That part of our process doesn't change. We still want to have the overtime pre-approved, but as Dr. McKinley said, if it doesn't get approved, we still will honor the work. Let's see. Overtime will be granted for the PeopleSoft module training. That is a no. We are asking people to take care of the training. It's part of your job. So we are asking for people to take care of that training. Managers are on board and should be allowing employees the ability to attend the sessions needed for the training. Let's see, the next question is, who's in charge of filling out the paperwork, the employee or the supervisor? PC McKinley, do you want to field that? Or maybe Director Adesida?
Director Adesida.
The request for overtime should be filled out, the form should be filled out by the supervisor, the manager, not the employee.
Great, thank you.
And then I just wanted to clarify something, that the overtime request forms is not yet on PeopleSoft. We're still using that paper form that we're routing to Adobe Sign. Saying that part of our process, evaluating and improving and all that stuff, we realized like we need that, and we are working on that to put that in place within PeopleSoft. So that will help us with auditing purposes, and also making sure that employees have a seamless way to request for overtime, and it will go to their managers. So that stay within the departmental managers, between the employee and their managers, to get the overtime request forms. After that is done, then you can enter your time. Then the manager you have your request approved, and then now you can enter your time after you complete the work. So we are working that so far. Please use the Adobe Sign paperwork that you have and keep that for your record for now. And we were working on moving that to the system.
Great, thank you, Chief Mehouelley. I think that answers the next question I see, which is, do we submit an overtime worksheet as an attached document? And until we launch the e-forms for overtime, I believe we still continue to use Adobe Sign. Let's see. We have another question about secondary position overtime rate. How does this confirm with union contracts?
The union contracts are silent about a secondary rate.
Great, thank you. Let's see, we have a request to repeat why position number is required. And I believe that's because it is a secondary role, not part of the overtime is for a secondary job function, not your primary job function. To whom the overtime authorization memo needs to be submitted. Until now, we're required to send it to payroll along with the overtime timesheet. So I'm going to field this in hopes that my colleagues from HR or payroll can correct me if I get this wrong. The overtime authorization memo needs to go to the supervisor responsible for that particular job function. So if it's an actual overtime work, meaning that you're putting in more than 40 hours for your day job, then it goes to your regular supervisor. If it is for a secondary position, then it needs to go to your supervisor for the secondary position. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Awesome, thank you.
That's correct. And then I would add that your primary supervisor will be notified about the activities. So needs to be notified by the activities. So make sure that you include your primary supervisor on this.
Great. We have a question, how is the blended rate determined? Will it be automatically calculated by the system?
Correct.
Great, thank you. Is there a different procedure for emergency after hours overtime? And I think the point of this question is where we haven't had the ability to get the request lined up ahead of time.
Emergency overtime is approved overtime. The key there is it needs to be truly an emergency, something that has to be done right then. They can't wait till a normal work day or work hours. So if there's a pipe that's broke, you know, a water pipe that's bursted, if there is an electrical outlet, you know, outage that's necessary for someone to be there at that time, those would be bona fide emergencies or some other type of emergency, and those are immediately approved. They don't require pre-approval.
Great, thank you. Let's see, how do we track hours worked as overtime in 9.2? So the training on time entry for regular full-time classified professionals is that you only report your out of office time. And that's a little bit different for hourly classified professionals where you do need to log the hours worked. Is there anything that we should add on that from my HR colleagues or payroll colleagues?
You're correct. They should log in the hours worked.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's a repeat of one that we had already answered.
And then I would just, Mark, I would just like add one more thing here. And then there was the question that come this weekend to me. You have in this case, you have a faculty member who's working another assignment and they receive a notification asking them to enter the LAR or all that stuff. So if you are working another job, which is not your primary job as a faculty member, or you will be receiving those notifications asking you to enter if you have any leave time or vacations and sick leave, and you will require to enter those within the system. So I know that people were not accustomed to fill out LAR before, but now you do not have to fill out the LAR every day. You only have to report, like Mark said, when you're leaving or sick leave, floating holidays, vacations, and the system will trigger an email reminding everybody by the end of the month that the month is coming if you want to, fill out your paperwork. So please, not paperwork, but enter your time to the new system. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we have a question asking, is this new? Can students work more than 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week now? Does this represent a policy change for us?
No, it doesn't represent a policy change. If someone works, all right, students are not supposed to work those hours. If they do work them, they will get paid overtime. That's not a policy change.
Great.
That's been the law since 1937. I want to just reinforce that.
Okay, we have a really good question to clarify the difference. Is there a difference between faculty stipend or classified for a particular service? I think this question is asking about working in a higher position on overtime. How is compensation done, depending upon a faculty member versus a classified professional?
All right, so if the question is if there's a classified professional that also has an appointment as a adjunct faculty working on a special assignment, so I'm not quite sure. The faculty are exempt. That's a learned exemption, learned professional exemption. So faculty do not get paid overtime. They do get stipends for different types of extra work they do. And that is basically being paid at a project rate, which is also allowed under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So that's not apples to apples. If you have, let's put it this way, if you have two appointments, if your primary appointment is non-exempt, your classified professional appointment, and your secondary appointment is exempt, whatever that might be, then you would get paid overtime based on your primary appointment, but not on your secondary appointment. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. And I think that answers the very next question that I look at, which is how does overtime done outside of your normal department route to the correct supervisor?
Yeah, I think I answered that. I think we've answered that question.
Yeah. It's a secondary position. It's not overtime.
If it's exempt. Now, if it's non-exempt, it could be overtime in the secondary position if it's over 40 hours in a week.
Great, thank you. There's a request to elaborate on who is responsible for ensuring available budget is in place for salaries and benefits for e-forms.
The applicable manager.
Yeah, that's one of the great benefits of our upgrade to PeopleSoft version 9.2 is that the system actually is now linked to those budgets. So it makes it a little bit easier, actually makes it a lot easier for the manager to determine if the budget is available for those positions or not. Let's see. We've got 19 open questions remaining and about 17 minutes left in our allotted 1 hour's time. We'll continue to try and answer as many questions as we can. Please note that we will put out an FAQ that includes the answers to the questions that were asked during the session. And because we understand that there are questions and that many people may not have been able to attend this in person. By the way, there are over 200 participants on the call at this time, so thank you very much for making time for us today. So we will continue to answer your questions. With so many changes in the district, is the district payroll prepared to support students, staff, and faculty who missed payment to avoid hardship as a direct result of the transition? How should the college advise if this should happen? I'm not exactly understanding this question, but I think it's really getting at the question is, are we prepared for the change in our workflow going to 9.2, and are we prepared to deal with things that might not happen the way that we expect them to in the new system? And I believe the answer to that is yes. I don't know, Chief Mehouelley, if there's anything that you want to add to that.
Yes, and we are right now, the overtime we're talking about that is impacted are not due until the end of the May. Right now, all overtime that was entered prior that is due for this month's payroll will accommodate those. And those people who work interdepartmental overtime and could not accommodate that to the system, because when the time you enter it is going to your primary managers, we asking all those people to fill out the paper overtime and send it for one-time processing. Moving forward, you need to your department need to enter another job record to move that. Now, the fluctuations, remember, you have to look at the two work we were doing. Before, we have a bunch of paper routing multiple offices, being chased, bring it back to payroll or HR. They will have to enter all that data manually to the system. And now the data is entered automatically when you enter them. So everything is processed within the system. So I will see that a plus, and I will see that again, and I will see HR will have more time to look into the data and make sure everything is accurate and processing them accordingly. So I think, yes, things happen when you deploy big changes like this, but we are ready to make an adjustment as needed. Thank you so much for the question.
Great. For faculty facilities overtime, is it one stipend a month, or will one e-form work for the whole fiscal affair? I'm sorry, or for the whole fiscal year?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. Does someone else know the answer? We'll have to get back with them on that one.
I was just wondering, is the question, and maybe we can answer it by making an assumption. I'm assuming that what they're saying is you get a secondary assignment, but you don't work every month. Maybe you work every couple of months, or you work during that particular season, say that it's baseball season. So you don't work in the fall, but you work in the spring. Then yes, you only need that one assignment. You only need that one budget code, and then it's activated based upon when you're working. It doesn't require every time you do overtime for you to create a new form with a new number if it's the same position and it's the same number. At least that's my understanding, HR.
Yeah, that's correct. That's the way that would work. Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
Great. Oh, this is a good question. Overtime earned will count for CalPERS highest salary. Does it count for that determination or not?
Yeah, overtime counts. Yeah.
Great. Let's see. I think we answered this question previously, but it's probably worth repeating. How are you distinguishing between secondary positions and out-of-class work for classified? I think VC McKinley, you had mentioned
I can answer that. Yeah, out of class work is for work in your current position of a different nature. So I'll use that example. I'm a financial analyst, and I'm also now being asked to do some other work that's not in my job description, but it's within the context of my regular job. It's not a second job working for another supervisor in a different area, in a different, totally different field. So that's the difference.
Great, thank you. Can the primary supervisor reject the secondary assignment?
They certainly can if it conflicts with the primary assignment.
Great. For example, working at a track meet that's happening during regular business hours.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. Will the overtime authorization form still be required prior to overtime in the new system? And the answer to that is yes. That's the overtime authorization form is a courtesy to let people know the plans for the overtime work. Let's see. I think we've answered that question previously. Will the district be publishing an overtime schedule of rates for each position so that staff can confirm their new blended rates? That seems unlikely.
No, we won't be doing that. Your overtime rate is 1.5 times your regular hourly rate. You only have a blended rate if you have a secondary position. There is no other blended rate. The vast majority of employees do not have secondary positions.
Right. Great. So the next question is for overtime worked through today. When will that be paid for full-time classified employees? Overtime worked in April will be paid at the end of May. Let's see, the next question is about.
Mark, I wanted to add quickly, why is that? Because a lot of people have questions. We are aligning our payroll to do with the other payroll systems that we have for the other groups. And this is affecting, I believe, local 30, 39 and 1021. They have a different pay date. So we are aligning everybody at the same time. So that's why that's the one-time change. Then moving forward, you are getting your overtime the same month and the same day within the same period. Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay. Facilities supervision is paid $50 an hour for faculty stipends. How would we determine a classified overtime rate for this?
So if that's a secondary position, it's what we've already said. There would be a secondary position, and the rate for that position would be based on what's the salary grade or level that position was assigned to, and overtime would be a blended rate then, if that's a secondary position.
Excellent. let's see, will there be an FAQ resource with all of these questions and answers? Not only for overtime, but other training as well? Yes, that resource is available in Canvas right now, which is the training for all of the PeopleSoft 9.2 software updates. The Canvas shell includes different chapters, if you will, for each of the different types of software, whether it be e-forms or time entry. And those different sections of Canvas include video. In most cases, it includes a short quick start guide. And our team from Huron is constantly adding resources to the Canvas training material. So stay tuned for that. We'll also be putting out the FAQs from this session today and getting the answers available. Okay. I'm seeing most of these questions have been answered previously or we've talked about. We've got about 8 minutes left in our scheduled time. I'm going to propose that we draw a line and respond to any of these remaining questions as part of our posting of the frequently asked questions as follow-up. And we can give Chancellor Jackson an opportunity to give us any parting words if she would like to do so. Really appreciate your participation in the call today. We have over 200 participants on the line. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I too want to thank all of you that are attending today. As we move through this migration, I know it's always difficult. One of my sayings is that, Mark Twain said, the only people who like change are babies. And so it's really rather true. People don't like change. They want to continue with the way they are. However, based upon the recommendations and also with the findings that we just have presented to you, we obviously need to clean up our internal controls. So the migration to PeopleSoft has made that abundantly clear to us. And we will continue to move forward because it aligns with what our collective bargaining agreements are, as well as to what our processes are, as well as to federal and state statutes. So thank you for your questions. It's difficult. Someone said, are we going to be putting out, a list of all of the overtime? It would be impossible for us to do a cross link with all the potential secondary positions you would have with your current job. That just is not feasible. But I think if you go through, what I assume, again, I don't know, but if you're going to do overtime, usually you know what you're going to get paid. You know what you're currently getting paid, and you can do the factor analysis just like Dr. McKinley outlined to get an idea of what your salary would be. The other thing that I wanted to say, and it wasn't really stated, is if you are in a position and you're doing a higher position, you must meet the minimum qualifications for that position. So it isn't just oh yeah, I'll come in and be your financial analyst and I'm the clerk that works at the swimming pool. You would have to have the background or the experience to be able to take that additional secondary assignment. So it's very clear, it's very straightforward. We're following our current collective bargaining agreements that says that overtime will be pre-approved. We're following through with that, except that the system is forcing us to do it. It isn't an option now. It is forcing us to do that. And it is down, it's decentralizing it so that we aren't doing all of this paperwork, and that you can delegate. A manager can delegate. You can also determine how long you want to delegate. You can delegate just, for a day and then go back. All of those opportunities are available in the PeopleSoft. And if you haven't attended the training, we recorded all of those trainings. Mark put the link in the chat if you want to go over. and look at those. And in those recordings, there were also questions that came up, and those got recorded also. So it isn't just a straight training session. There were individuals that were in the training session that asked questions that were also recorded. So we are trying to make this as seamless as possible, realizing that it is going to take a little bit of change in our mindset. But we want to make sure that we get this information out to you. So that was why we had this kind of emergency town hall, because there was a lot of questions, as we indicated today, with all the ones that Mark asked, that we wanted to address in an open forum, so everybody was aware of the questions and what the answers were. So thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Amy, for being here on our legal team to provide the backdrop. And thank you, Immaculate and Dr. McKinley. And again, thank you, Mark, for taking the lead on the questions and the answers. So is there one last chance for any question that's just burning that somebody posted that we need to address? If not, we'll put all of this on the webpage with the recording, just like we did for the other town halls. Just give us a little bit of time. It doesn't happen immediately, but we usually try to get it out within 3 to 5 days and get it out, even if we just get the recording out and don't have all the FAQs, so individuals can view it and hopefully gain some knowledge if they're not aware of this policy change. So with that, I want to thank everyone and have a great Monday and the rest of the week.
Thank you, Chancellor. Goodbye,
everyone.
everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.